Hi, Ira. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Good evening po sa ating lahat. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone sa lahat nandito sa ating Zoom webinar. And good evening din, Cheska. Ayan, marami pa po pumapasok sa ating Zoom. Kaya pasok lang po tayo, invite lang po tayo ng ating friends. Ayan, Cheska. Excited ka na ba?
Super excited na ako for tonight, Ira. Kasi grabe narinig ko bigatin ng ating mga guest speaker for tonight.
Yes, that's very true. Makikilala natin sila mamaya na yan. And of course, alam mo, sobrang excited din ako dahil hindi lang relevant yung mga topic natin ngayon. Talagang sure ako na maraming nangangailangan netong mga topics na to ngayon. And of course, excited din ako sa raffle mamaya. Alam mo ba yun,
Sabi
Cheska?
ko na nga ba, Ira? Oo, grabe. Ang grand prize ay balita ko, 500 pesos lang naman.
Talaga ba? 500 pesos? Grabe. Sobrang taas pa rin yan, ha?
Pero hindi tayo kasama.
Oo nga, hindi daw tayo pwedeng sumama. Pero we just want to announce po na yung mga kasama po sa raffle mamaya ay mga registered participants lang, yung included na mga pangalan. So if hindi po tayo registered, hindi po natin makikita yung pangalan natin. So, sorry po. And please stay po hanggang sa end ng ating webinar dahil dun po natin ibibigay ang 500 pesos na prize. Tama ba yun, Cheska?
Yes. Sa mga active participants lang natin ibibigay yung mga prizes na yan. So, dapat attentive sila and dapat magstay sila until the end of our webinar. And Ira, speaking of registrants, super dami nang nag-register. Grabe, thank you guys for taking the time para umattend ng ating webinar tonight. But if you have friends or mga kakilala na hindi nakapag-register, okay lang po yan because we are live sa Facebook ngayon. So, nag-livestream din po tayo sa ating Facebook page na YWAV Fairview. That is YWAV-Fairview. So, makikita nyo po na we are live. So, you can share the link to your friends na hindi nakapag-register para makapanood din sila kasama natin.
Yes. Invite your friends, no, para makapanood sila ng webinar natin ngayon. And alam mo, Cheska, sabi mo nga kanina, napakadaming nag-register. And kasama ng daming registrants na yan, ay napakadami din ng questions na sinend sa ating speakers. Kaya naman, to limit the time, no, hindi natin masasagot lahat, of course, kaya pumili lang tayo ng 8 questions, 4 for each speakers. Kaya naman, makinig po tayo mabuti dahil some of these questions naman po ay mababanggit sa ating discussion.
Yes.
So listen attentively, everyone, dahil if we have some insights, we have some inquiries that we have, no, mababanggit po yan lahat sa ating discussion.
Yes. Actually, super na-excited talaga ako kasi nakita ko nag-chat yung mga participants natin, no? From all over the Philippines talaga.
Tingnan natin, Cheska. May mga nakikita ko from Malaysia. Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Meron din ako nakita from North Cotabato. Hello, good evening.
North Cotabato. So, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao pala tayo dito, Cheska.
Oh, and outside the Philippines also kasi nga meron tayong from Malaysia, di ba? Hi!
Yes, and of course, hello po sa mga taga Jesus is Alive Fairview. Jesus is Alive Community sa lahat po ng branches ng GIA. Hello po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much for joining.
I-shout out natin sila, Cheska, no? Nakikita natin, meron taga Puerto Princesa City, Palawan. Hello po sa inyo.
Hello. Naku, bucket list ko yan makapunta ng Palawan.
Dalhin niyo po kami dyan. Very peaceful po dyan. And of course, watching from Cebu City, hello po sa inyo.
Meron tayong participant from Gia JRLWI Pinyahan. Hello, good evening po mga ka-Gia. Ayan, so maraming pa pong pumapasok na participant.
Gia Aurora, hello po sa inyo. Welcome po.
Meron from Iloilo. Good evening.
Watching from Mandaluyong City, Caloocan City, Cebu City. Ang dami, Cheska. Ang dami natin ngayon. Ilan na ba tayo ngayon? Nakikita mo ba?
Parang di ko ba? Ayan, parang 96 na tayo tonight.
96. Hello po. Hello, AKAY Canada. Sa lahat po ng mga AKAY Canada, hello po sa inyong lahat.
Yes. Yes, good evening po. For sure, excited na rin po kayo sa mga maririnig natin later. Marami po tayong matututunan mamaya.
Ayan. And Cheska, since it's already 6:10 p.m., tama ba ang time ko? Baka hindi tayo pare-parehas ng time dahil magkakaya ng time zone, no? Pero sa time ng Philippines, it's already 6:10 p.m. At sa tingin ko, handang-handa na rin ang ating participants. So why don't we officially start tonight's webinar?
Yes, again, welcome everyone and good evening. My name is Cheska Serrano.
And I am Ira Cuarto.
And we are delighted to join you tonight as your host for this event. On behalf of YWAV at AKAY Fairview, a youth organization under Jesus is Alive Community Church, we bring to you AKAY, honing healthy communication, emotional expression, and empathy, a mental health webinar.
This webinar is a part of YWAV and AKAY Fairview's month-long holistic celebration of our 18th year anniversary entitled Usbong. Cheska, if you remember last October 1, ay nagkaroon tayo ng evangelistic event through a food drive. No? Di lang tayo nakapag-share at ng nakakabusog na lugaw, but our hearts were filled with joy as we shared God's love to the youth of Sapamanay.
Yes, Ira, natatandaan ko yan. And speaking of nabusog, noong socials night that we held last October 9 naman, nabusog din tayong lahat, hindi lang from the overflowing food and drinks, but also from the words and the presence of God. At syempre, kagaya nga ng sinabi mo kanina, Ira, no, na holistic ang celebration na ito ng YWAV and AKAY Fairview. And with the earlier mentioned programs that focused on the societal and social aspects, no, hindi natin pwedeng kalimutan na pagtuunan ng pansin at pagpapahalaga ang mental health ng bawat isa. Lalong-lalo na ng mga kabataan, di ba, Ira?
That's very right, Cheska. Napaka-importante na as we walk on our own personal faith, nakakapag-bless din tayo ng iba through the way we treat people with our words, actions, and behavior. Alam mo, Cheska, lahat naman tayo nag-fail, no? But it is important that we journey to self-actualization and the betterment of ourselves. Kaya naman, we've come up with this free mental health webinar with the objective to help develop a society that progresses towards emotional and mental maturity through first, fostering listening and empathic community that models God's grace, and second, establishing healthy patterns of responding to offenses and conflicts.
Yes, napakahalaga na mapag-usapan natin itong mga to, Ira. Considering the instant gratification of today's age, many of us may not even realize that the instantaneous communication offered by social media may foster unhealthy habits in the way we communicate and express our emotions. So dahil readily available na yung mga ganitong avenues for communication, minsan hindi na natin naiisip yung mga things na nasasabi natin online or through online messages sa social media, diba? So, parang hindi na tayo nakakapag-think before we click.
Tama yan. Hindi na tayo nakakapag-think before we click. I so feel you, Cheska. And another thing, no, madalas talaga nami-misunderstood natin yung messages online. Kaya nga ako, pag tawang-tawa talagang caps lock yung ha-ha-ha ko. Pag galit
paano
naman,
ha-ha-ha?
Pag galit naman, nilalagyan ko ng maraming exclamation point para damang-dama yung emotions na nire-relay ko.
Totoo yan.
Minsan di na natin naiisip yung nararamdaman ng kausap natin from the other end of the line kasi hindi natin sila nakikita. Relate ka ba doon, Cheska?
Oo, ganyan din ako, Ira. Alam mo yan. Sa mga chat natin. And I believe na marami rin sa ating participants tonight ang nakaka-relate dyan. Kaya naman in this webinar, we will be learning how to communicate and express our emotions healthily, kahit pa through online yan or in person. With that, at this point po, I invite everyone in welcoming God's presence. Let us ask for the Lord's guidance and wisdom as we proceed with tonight's program. So to lead us in worship, we have Ate Kimberly Fantabella, to be followed by the opening prayer led by Pastor Michael Benjamin.
welcome you, Lord, and just want to worship you, God, this evening. Hallelujah, Jesus. All these pieces broken and scarred, we see together when dead and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see now. Oh, I can see love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up to broken to Hallelujah, Jesus. You take a failure, you take a weakness, you set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel to want to see your life in me. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see now. I can see love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up to broken to yes, Lord, we want to see your blessings, oh Lord. Yes, Lord, we want to see your love, Lord Jesus. Oh, I can see love. Oh, I can see light in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up to broken to life.
Panginoon, marami connect ng mga kabataan at mga young people at mga singles ngayong gabi, O Diyos. At hayaan mo, O Diyos, na ang event na to ay maging pagpapala sa marami. Makatulong ito na maintindihan ang ganitong aspeto sa aming mga buhay. Hayaan mo, O Diyos, na maramdaman din po namin ang iyong pagmamahal, ang iyong kapangyarihan ngayong gabi. Ano man ang pinagdadaanan ng bawat isa, alam po namin na hindi magiging hadlang ang mga ganitong mga technology. Bagkus, Panginoon, ay hayaan mo na sa kabila ng ganitong online, Panginoon, ay kaya mo o makakakilos ka sa buhay ng bawat isa. Hayaan mo na maging bukas ang aming puso, ang isipan ng bawat isa upang maranasan ka namin, at higit sa lahat ay maintindihan po namin yung mga i-discuss or ituturo ngayong gabi. Maraming salamat to Diyos. Ang lahat ay magsabi ng maraming salamat, Panginoon, sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen.
Now, without further ado, let us proceed with our first topic. That would be learning healthy emotional expression. With that, let me first introduce our first speaker for tonight. Our speaker for tonight's first topic is a counseling therapist recognized by the Association of Counseling Therapists in Alberta, Canada. She is a registered therapeutic counselor, a member of the Association of Cooperative Counselors and Therapists in Canada, and is currently employed with the Government of Alberta as a career and employment consultant since 2014. Most of her jobs are in the field of mental health, human services, counseling, and education. She has a master's degree in Christian education, major in guidance and counseling at Peace Graduate School, currently completing her thesis for another MA in counseling at Our Lady of Fatima University. She used to work as a guidance counselor and professor at Quezon City campus before she migrated to Canada.
She is also an ACTS coordinator in Edmonton and all over Canada churches, and is called Tita Jane by the members. She is a mother of 3 and the wife of Mr. Joe Ramos. Lastly, she is a servant of God who loves to lead and influence people to follow the examples of Christ. To present to us learning healthy emotional expression, let us all welcome Miss Dubhe Jane Ramos.
Virtual clap, everyone. Welcome po, Miss Jane.
Hello po, Miss Jane. Good evening po.
Hello,
Good morning
hello.
po.
Good morning from Edmonton. 4:23 a.m. here. I was awake probably like 3 a.m. Not to be sure that I won't be late for this webinar. So it's an honor to be with you again and to speak in front of you and whoever is watching via Facebook Live. I would like to acknowledge my anaks or my children in AKAY Edmonton. They are currently joining me right now. So hello Edmonton, and hello to everyone who's watching and who's here in this webinar. Okay, so as we start, when I was told about this session, I was like, oh, nakaka-pressure pag maraming nanonood, right? So, or kaya maraming ano. So, sanay lang po akong mag-speak sa Edmonton sa AKAY. And I'm not really, though I teach and I do present, but sometimes, you still not get used to it. But I was asked by one of the AKAY members here in Edmonton to speak in English. So I will be speaking in English because he is an Englisher. He is an Englisher. So we need to speak in English most of the time. Sometimes he would like, Tita Jane, please translate, okay? So now I would like to acknowledge everyone. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. To begin, when this topic is really, I would say, very timely, because we all are humans and we do feel emotions, right? So, pag wala kang emosyon, parang hindi ka tao, right? And then, but nasobrahan ka naman sa emosyon, minsan nawawala din yung pagpapakatao mo. So tama ba yung pagtatagalog o yung pagpapakatao mo, di ba? Because when we are driven with so much emotions and this just like parang flood na yung emotions mo and things can get out of hand, right? So yeah. I believe there's someone who will roll the slides, right? Okay, so let's start with the first slide. So in this webinar, we will be talking about, of course, introduction as to what emotion or honing emotional or healthy emotional expressions. And of course, we have to identify as well the 4 types of emotion. 4 types of communication that leads to misunderstanding and that leads to conflict and that leads to para siyang domino effect, right? So it's very important that we need to know our communication, how the way we talk, how the way we communicate, and how we relate with others. So we will also discuss honing healthy emotional expression, when to speak, when not to speak, when to say things, when to verbalize, when to even the emotional expressions, right? So, and of course, when things are becoming out of control, then we have to learn how to do the tools, and there's like tools and techniques that we can get our mind away from unhealthy thought patterns. Next slide, please. So introduction. So as our introduction, to reflect God's image is to experience emotion, and God is described at various times in the Bible as being moved with compassion, Hosea 11:8. So you can take those verses and then you can read it later. So, and also the Lord was also moved with grieved, Genesis 6:6-7, happy, angry, and those are the verses. And these are all valid emotions. So we have to know na even the Lord, he felt this emotion when he was betrayed, when he was mocked, he was all of those emotions. It could be like not those are unpleasant emotions, right? So it's biblical. It's biblical that even the Lord has experienced it. And even people, even prophets, even those apostles and disciples, they have experienced valid emotions. So those are valid, and it doesn't mean that they felt that emotion hindi na po sila tao, because they're still human. Remember that the Lord has came to earth in a human form, right? Okay, so I can see that there's no slide. There's no slides showing. Can someone's, there's no slide showing that. There's someone who messaged me. Can you not see the slides? Can you confirm?
Meron po, Miss Jane.
Meron? Okay, so Christine Joy, okay. So yeah, to continue, so our emotions reflect the nature of the one who created us. However, whatever or what we do with our emotions may or may not be honoring God. So because it really depends on how we take that emotion, we process that emotion, and of course, when we show it to other people, then that becomes unhealthy, or that could be healthy as well. Next slide, please. So we have to identify first what kind of communicator we are. Meaning is like, what is communication? Bakit nga ba tayo nagko-communicate? What we should do, and what, kasi parang sa akin, communication is a really a crucial part in an everyday living. So communication is always 2 ways, right? So it's the act of giving, receiving, and sharing information. In other words, it's It's also talking or writing and listening or reading. So communication is also nonverbal and verbal, right? So this is what communication is. And there are 4 types of emotion. Next slide, please, anak. There are 4 types of communication. We have to identify anong klase tayong communicator or where are we belong in this one. Normally or usually, there is a breakage in communication because we don't understand what type or which do we belong in this category, or oh yeah, he is like that one, she is like that one, and it tends to be pointing fingers, and that leads to, of course, feeling of frustration. So number 1 is if you are a passive communicator or passive communication. So it is not expressing feelings or needs, ignoring your own personal rights, and allowing others to do so. Next. So it's also deferring to others for decision making in order to avoid tension or conflict. Even in the workplace, it is very common, right? Especially, I would say that for us Filipinos, we are sometimes, and most of us also, are passive communicator because we just don't want conflict. So that's why we just get along with, para bang, sige na, palagpasin ko na lang to. You know, you just let it go, or you just say na, ayoko kasi ng conflict at ayoko makasakit ng damdamin. We're too nice. Meaning we're too nice that we forget to draw boundaries because we just want to avoid conflict and tension. But in the end, it is us who suffer because we don't want to communicate how we feel. Next slide, please. It also often leads to misunderstanding, built up anger, and resentment. So because we are passive, so if you are a passive communicator, or this is who you are, nadadagdagan, so nagbi-build up siya, and that could lead, and one day you will just, para kang bulkan, you know, sasabog ka na lang because of the built up of anger and resentment. If you are this kind of communicator, then it's not healthy, right? So sometimes there are people who are passive communicator that they don't want to address the issue and say, yeah, I'll just let it go for now. And then let it go, and then let it go. And then yung let it go mo, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years na, nandun pa rin siya nakatago. And then one day, you know, it will just explode. When, sabi nga pag nakakanti sa Tagalog, right? So when it's being rubbed again, so you become like onion skin. You could become so sensitive that one day you will just explode. Next slide, please. Passive communication also can be a safer communication option when a conflict may escalate to violence. But here, you know, in Canada, we do have a non-violent, we have this training that's called non-violent crisis intervention, wherein we learn how to communicate in a world or in situations wherein it doesn't need to be escalated, or once it's becoming intense, then it escalates, or it has a tendency to escalate in violence. So just want to share this. In my workplace, we do a lot, I do deal with a lot of Albertans, and because most of my clients actually are struggling with mental health issues. So whenever they hear the word no, they hear the word I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. So then it would lead into escalation, right? So it's like, why can't you help me? Da, 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 da. So then it would lead into, so we get trainings, right, for nonviolent crisis intervention, how you will intervene. But in terms of communication, the passive communicator, it can be a form of communication wherein just to ease or to avoid conflict and not to escalate in violence. Next slide, please. So examples includes statements like, I'm okay with whatever you want to do. Body language includes failing to make eye contact or looking down. So those are signs that you can be aware of when you are talking to someone, when you are dealing with someone who is a passive communicator. Are you still with me? Baka may inaantok na. Okay, so another form of communication is aggressive communication. It is expressing feelings, needs, and ideas at the expense of others, ignoring others' rights in order to support your own. So kung kanina passive, hindi kumikibo, ito naman sumobra, aggressive, right? So parang lahat na lang ng ano, it would, you know, he would take it personally, like, no, something like, no, I didn't, I don't like what you said, or I'm not comfortable with, and it becomes aggressively addressed towards that person. So next slide, please. So in aggressive communication, there are ways that you can quickly identify if the person is an aggressive communicator. So they are defensive, or they're showing defensive or hostile when confronted by others. Na para bang, kuya, yung ginawa mo kanina. It's like, no, I didn't say that. Or parang, that's not what my intention is. Yung para bang laging yun nga yung parang defensive. And it often alienates and hurt others, and it can help meet your needs, quickly. Next slide. So aggressive communication examples include statements like, this is what we're doing, or get over it. Body language includes crossing arms, eye rolling, or finger pointing. So are we nakaka-relate ba kayo sa ating sa ating topic tonight, right? So it could be you, like sometimes you could be like this, right? So you could be and then now that you are learning this, you can be more aware, and this webinar is for us to create awareness, right? So na parang, nga no, minsan ganyan ako. Minsan because I'm too defensive that I don't want others to step on me, then you become aggressive. Sometimes it's also a defense mechanism. Next slide, please. So assertive communication. It is a direct, honest communication of thoughts and feelings. Next slide, please. It's respecting the feelings, ideas, and needs of others while also asserting your own. So a little bit of trivia. When I came to Canada, I'm kind of like the passive one, the passive communicator, that I will just take everything in. So, because you're Filipino, you try to be nice, and I am working with a diverse group of people wherein I work with different different races. With that is meaning I work with Ethiopians, I work with Canadians, I work with Chinese. Like I work with different races in the whole wild world, where you can see it in Canada. And because I am used to like, I can just let it go, I can just let it slide. But there came a point wherein I felt like I'm being a victim of racism. So that's when I learned, and I have to be assertive in my communication, or I have to assert myself and really like, you will not let somebody step on you in a nice way, and not to be in a confronting way or not being rude. And I think that's one of the good influences of Canada brought to me, like in my personality, in bringing, or changing my behavior and the way I interact with people. That I will not, if I know that I'm right and I am not, and I am, uh, and I say things that is not violating the law and the law of God, and that's where I become assertive in my communication. Um, yeah, so in Canada, you need to be assertive because people here before, when I was working with the government, um and prior to that I was working in a non-profit organization that helps people with mental illness and addiction issues and homelessness. Because I couldn't assert myself, there are numerous or numbers of scenarios or situations that I was actually being uh bullied, to the point of, like, even my boss, I'm like, I can't be in a situation wherein my faith is being compromised, and people are stepping on me because I am a Filipino, or I'm not a, like, Canadian citizen, yung parang hindi ka tumubo dito sa land of Canada. So, and that's where I learned to change my perspective on things and became an assertive communicator. So next slide, please. So assertive communication may not be effective when interacting with individuals that threaten your personal safety. Of course, when things are escalating and the other person is like really hooked up in a heated argument, being assertive is like you're trying to say, na, this is how I feel, this is how you made me feel, but the other person is just so close-minded, na I don't want to hear whatever you're saying. So being assertive, so this one, being assertive communication is may not be, effective if your safety is at stake. Okay, so next slide, please. So people often misinterpret assertive behavior as aggressive. So Americans and women are often mislabeled as a result. So I find it in the Western culture, especially in America in America and in Canada, that people, or they just say whatever they want to say. They would say it straight into your face. They don't in Tagalog we call that, wala silang maraming palabok, wala silang maraming sabi-sabi na parang I don't like you, or it's like it's straight on your face. And tayo mga Pilipino, because we are very sensitive and we can handle, like, para bang, and we will think of it like, bakit niya kaya sinabi yun? Because they're very straightforward. Believe me, when I was dealing with this, especially sa mga clients namin, I'm like, sobra naman to. Like, you have this picture in your head, on your head, na saying na, why does she need to say that? Para bang, hindi mo matanggap kasi hindi ka ganon, right? So hindi mo siya matanggap. You cannot accept it because you're not like them and you're not like her or him, right? So they're very straightforward when they are communicating. And I believe that for that it's very normal for culture. And I think also the types of communication also varies between culture, between how we were brought up, right? So yung cultural background, and we also have cultural differences. Another thing is, because of my profession that I'm into counseling, a lot of clients or na nakita ko or na-encounter ko is like there is a conflict in communication between when I do marital counseling, is between husband and wife. especially for different cultures. And cultures wherein the husband is a Canadian or Caucasian and been married to Filipinos, and they would always normally call me to ask for help because they have a different views and opinions and values. So when they join together, of course, there's clash. And it's not because of blended marriage as well. So there's communication gap between dealing with children who are being raised as Filipinos and with stepdads and stepmoms who are Canadians, Caucasians, and other races. So there are issues that, due to the miscommunication can really lead into arguments and conflict. But going back to being an assertive communicator, you still have, there's advantages and disadvantages of it. It could put you in an advantage position, but also people can also misinterpret it if you are not seeing things on the same lens, right? So yeah, continue. So assertive communication examples of these statements is the I statement. So I feel when you, and I need for you to do. So body language includes eye contact, straight posture, and relaxed gestures. So knowing about this now you can identify na, oh, sometimes I can be like that, but also sometimes I'm not like that, right? So it's very important to know this. Which type of communication do you fall under? Next slide, please. So now I think this is the last one. So it's a passive-aggressive communication. If you are a passive-aggressive communicator, you will appear as a passive on the surface, but subtly acting out of anger. Next slide, please. Exerting control over others by using sarcasm and indirect communication or avoiding the conversation. Next slide, please. Passive-aggressive communicator is also has a limited consideration for the rights, needs, or feelings of others. So check yourself. Ikaw ba to? So, di ba, parang, yeah, sometimes I can be like that, right? So next slide, please. So examples include passive statements and body language followed by giving the silent treatment, spreading rumors, and sabotaging other person's effort. Next slide, please. So now that we have identified, or maybe you have identified yourself in one of those, what kind of communicator are you? So if there is a break in communication, let's say, even in the ministry nga di ba? It's very normal na a church daw is, the church is not perfect because it is full of imperfect people, right? So putting it in a Christian context, we can still be, parang hindi pa rin tayo, anong tawag doon sa Tagalog? I'm trying to use my Tagalog, gusto ko ng maganda kasi siya sa Tagalog. Gusto mong maintindihan yung kasama mo sa ministry, pero hindi mo talaga siya maintindihan sometimes, right? And that is true. So, thumbs up nga kung nakaka-relate. Diba? So, there are things talaga that sometimes like, hindi ko talaga siya maintindihan and I'm trying to understand him, but I couldn't, right? And then, if there is a breakdown, so it could lead into conflicts, diba? So, bakit nga ba may conflict and why conflict results to emotional distress? And it could and it could lead further into emotional or mental health issues, right? And mental health breakdowns. So first one is if there is a breakdown in communication or or poor communication. In a family setting, not everyone in the family would have the same attitude, right? So even nga, ang make natin is we're very unique. We're created by the Lord. It's all biblical. But the Lord made us different from each other, from your sister, from your kuya, ate, tita, tito, mom and dad. And so even if, even if your kakambal mo na nga you're still different. Even if you have your identical twins, your DNA the same, pero yung attitude is different, right? So, a lot of times, kapag ka merong, what causes conflict is if there's a breakdown in communication. The moment that there's a breakdown in communication, or you haven't communicated it well, or there's or poor communication, that's when conflict comes. And it could also be misinterpreted, right? So kapag may breakdown ng communication, napakahirap, because if you are a passive communicator and the other one is assertive, diba? You don't want to hurt the other person's feeling. So what you do is you just shy away, or you just draw away. I'm just conscious about my time. How many minutes do I have left? I just want, baka ginaganahan ako sa pagsasalita, over time na pala ako. Okay, next one is misunderstandings. Of course, what causes conflicts is misunderstandings when you see things on a different lens. Meaning, let's say, gusto mo pa lang naman, let's say sa CMA, and it's very normal. I mean, nangyayari yan. Bakit kaya bigla ko naisip ang CMA? Kasi CMA ministry. And here, even sa Canada, nangyayari sa amin yan. O sige, sabihin natin media and, different kinds of ministry. If you are not seeing things on the same lens, and the other one has a different interpretation, and you have the different interpretation on things, then, it would lead into, oh naku, 5 minutes na lang. And then next one is personal differences. Okay, so bilisan natin. Next slide, please. So honing healthy emotional expression. So how do we, what are the healthy ways in honing healthy emotional expression? Next slide, please. So of course, we have to take our emotions off the shelf. First is we need to identify what we are feeling, whether locked in a conflict, feeling irritable or upbeat. It can be helpful to imagine your emotions as those set on a shelf until needed. So it's kind of like, meron kang bookshelf, meron kang different emotions there, galit ka, annoyed ka, you're frustrated, you're angry, you are, you have to identify what you're feeling. Okay, na-frustrate ako. Whether it's a conflict between you and your parent, your friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, or the significant other, it's helpful to release it, but in a healthy way. Next, I wanna actually focus on the questions later. Second is, remember that having emotions is neither right or wrong. We simply feel what we feel, but it doesn't mean that our feelings are always just justified. Explain natin yan later sa questions. So of course, para tong train or traffic light, right? So you have to stop, look, and listen. Next slide, please. So lastly, when we are faced with argument or conflict with someone, we have to stop and ask yourself, diba? Sometimes we really have to be reflective on that. When the becomes heated argument na, is this issue more valuable than my relationship with this person? However, it really depends. It really depends on the situation and what you are arguing. Kasi nga, you can be a passive communicator, you just take it in, and then the people tend to abuse you and tend to do the same things over and over again, to hurt your feelings, right? So, of course, relationship is valuable. But there are also relationships that needs to be taken out of your life or needs to be stopped if it's not causing you to grow and it's not healthy, right? So also you have to look at the you have to look, are there any hidden factors that might be intensifying your emotions? Of course, it could be stress, it could be, um, it could be like mental health issues, or it could be like a financial problem or anything that could intensify your emotions or why you're feeling that way. And of course, you have to listen and pay attention to the layers behind these emotions and learn to recognize the other factors that play into your feelings. So, of course, we're Christians, right? So we have to ask the Holy Spirit why you are feeling what you're feeling, or why your spouse, your child, your family member, friend, church mate feels or behaves that way. So it's always looking past the person rather than just looking the person, right? So next slide, please. So tools and techniques. I always, these are helpful psychotherapeutic techniques with evidence basis. So next slide. And I even suggest it sa aking mga clients. So mindfulness. We can do a Christian meditation and relaxation. You know how you meditate the word of God, right? So you can still meditate the word of God. It doesn't need to be like mag-yoga ka to do this. But mindfulness is a very powerful tool. Sometimes it's called grounding. And it's characterized by meditation and relaxation techniques. The idea is to become more self-aware. You pay attention to your thoughts, feelings, and sensations in that moment without purposefully deciding whether they're good or bad, and without becoming overwhelmed or overly reactive. In short, you tune in into what's real right now. Next slide. And of course, you have to talk it out. It is always recommended to talk to your spiritual advisor, mentor, or counselor. If behavior is resulting to unhealthy thought patterns, it is always best to talk to a counselor or psychotherapist or psychologist. That's what they're there for, right? That's what we're here for. You talk it out. Doon ka maglabas ng galit mo, ng frustration mo sa iyong counselor, advisor, or someone that you think that you have that safe space. And I would always recommend it. Personally, here in Edmonton, sa AKS, frustrated ka, sige, kausapin mo ko. Magkape tayo sa Tim Hortons, right? So, even, because there could be reasons why, and it's good to always talk it out, and to also not to validate your emotions, but to give enlightenment on how you will handle things. And I guess that's about it. So I hope that, your takeaway for tonight is God has created us, you, me and you, with the capacity to feel, and our emotions are wonderful gifts. So it could be, kasi hindi lang naman negative ang emotions. It could also be there's positive emotions, right? So they are God's gift to us, yet they must be stewarded well. With the help of the Holy Spirit, we can identify what it is that we are feeling, but what is happening beneath the surface and what to do about it. So still, it's still learning us to, I know it's not an overnight thing that you can just change like a magic na, oh, now I didn't handle, but at least gives you an awareness, right? Like this webinar can give you an awareness how to respond to unhealthy emotions and to have that awareness and being mindful of your actions, your speech, and everything that comes in between. So thank you. And now I am ready to answer those questions.
Yes, thank you so much po, Miss Jane. We appreciate po yung inyong pag-accept ng aming invitation dito. Super aga pa po pala dyan. Ayan, ang dami ko pong naging realizations and nakapag-reflected po ako with my own way of expressing my emotions. So to continue with our discussion on healthy emotional expression, we'll take this opportunity to consult Miss Jane's expertise and ask her several questions that you guys sent in through your registrations. So, ito po Miss Jane, yung first question. How would you know if a particular emotion must be expressed and or released? What are the healthy or godly ways of releasing anger and other negative emotions?
Okay. So the question that was given is, how do you know if a particular emotion must be expressed and released? I guess the question is not how would you know, but how will you express that emotion and release that emotion? So I know that things can be becoming, when you're frustrated talaga at galit ka, and sometimes kailangan ko talagang ilabas to. Right? So pagkagalit tayo, kailangan mong ilabas at kailangan mo talagang yung para bang I just need to let it out or air it out. So I think discernment as a Christian, na when you say things, you still have to be cautious that when you say things, but when you are flooded with negative emotions nga, because there is like repetitive of offense na, then talaga namang sasabog ka, right? And it's not, I would say na, it's very unlikely, to for a Christian to behave that. And I think Jesus understood it because Jesus himself, once nagalit din ng Lord when 'di ba yung kanyang ang kanyang house ay ginawang marketplace, and Jesus was very upset and frustrated. We can be upset, we can be frustrated, we can express that. So hindi question dito kung paano, kung kailan mo siya ilalabas. Kasi para bang may timer ka na parang, itong emotion na to ilalabas ko to ngayon, pero yung isang emotion i-hold ko lang. Every emotion is valid. Like at first siguro dapat maintindihan na created by the Lord na we can let it out, we can ng emotion, pero with caution, and you have to be cautious about it. And of course, bago ka magsalita, mo muna siya, process mo muna siya sa brain mo na, if I say this, would it build a healthy relationship with this person? If I don't say this, would it destroy myself or it would destroy the person? So sometimes you have to check and balance, right? So discernment is the best tool, right? Kasi we all have been given the discernment of from the Lord. So kailan mo siya i-express mo siya in a healthy way and i-release mo siya in a healthy way. Next question is, what are the healthy, godly ways of releasing anger and negative emotions? So you always go back to the Bible, what it says, right? So there are certain verses, I've actually written them down. I can just probably paste it later sa chat. But godly ways is releasing anger is we always go back to the word of God. Kasi nga kung human emotions lang paiiralan natin, we will all fall. Kasi we are humans and we have emotions, and we are all imperfect people na, but we have a perfect God. And sometimes talaga nagkakaroon tayo ng anger outburst, and yung mga nagiging reactive tayo towards a certain situation, a certain person, especially that person you already branded that person in your head na itong taong ito na So when that person comes to you, the tendency is you either close or like a clam, or you will become like a wheelbarrow that you keep on digging. And it's like, no, hindi ako papayag na api-apihin mo ako, or hindi ako papayag na i-offend mo ako, right? So it's still very important to practice discretion and discernment in all of this. Still, we always go back to the word of God. And when things are becoming out of control, then say, hey, I'm gonna pause, breathe, and go back to the word of God. I can just read the next question. So how do you handle mental breakdowns and how emotional expression affects your work? For this one, I would say not everything is about you. Do not take it personal. Even in the workplace, kapag kami sa office ay nagbabaliktad, I would say the balitaktakan. Kasi remember, I've worked with diverse group, right? Or diverse people. And sometimes when in the meeting, you lay everything on the table. And you feel like the person is being very personal to you. But even in the ministry, right? Even in the church, do not take it personal because it's not about you, but it's about the situation. So you always focus on the situation, the causes of the situation, why the situation has become like that, why the person has become like that. So you always see past the person, not the person. So you don't take it personal to him, to her, and you don't take it personally. How do you handle emotional breakdowns? If it is to the point that it is sabotaging you or breaking you at some point and destroying your peace, and also it is to the point wherein, kasi you can also identify you can also identify na it's not helping me anymore, it's causing for me to lose my peace, and it's every time na nakikita ayoko na mag-church because of that person, ayoko nang umattend ng Bible study because of that person, or you know, no, lumalabas ka lang, labas pa. Anong tawag doon? Parang you just keep on ignoring the person and you couldn't function well, or sometimes naman you're just being a passive-aggressive na tao. So, ang mangyayari niyan is what really happens is you will be the one to suffer, right? So, how do you handle mental breakdowns? See a counselor. That is the best that is the best advice that I can see, because for us counselors, what we do is we help you identify the problem. Kasi sometimes for us, when we are overwhelmed with the emotion, we're just focused on what we feel at saka yung kung ano yung problema. But we don't see like where the problem came from, what are the causes of the problem, and what will you do about the problem. So in counseling, your therapist can tell you and can present you healthy ways for you to cope. You can be given exercises, you can be given situations, and you know, the psychotherapeutic treat or the psychotherapeutic modalities are being incorporated during the counseling session. So if it's to the point of mental breakdowns, see a counselor. And I think the last question is, any suggestion for people who are not used to verbalizing what they truly feel or think? Even though they know in their head the right thing to do, they still couldn't bring themselves to do it properly. Okay, so parang ano lang to, si Paul. I do what I hate to do, and I don't do what is the right thing to do. Right? So, even though, if you go back to my lesson kanina, you really have to like stop if you need to stop and be away from a particular situation na alam ko naman na ito ang dapat kong gawin. I know what is the right way to do, but I don't do it. But I guess the question is, why are you not doing it? You know what is the right thing to do, but you chose to do the unhealthy way, right? And I know that it could be different from everyone because everyone is unique. And as a human, sabi nga natin, hindi lang ito about all spiritual. There could be a psychological aspect into it. And that's why it's very important that we have to seek advice, you know, from our mentors, say from your pastors, because they see the bigger picture. Pero minsan, paano kung ang problema yung pastor o yung mentor mo, di ba? Or yung BCCF mo. So how do you, it's always, I would say, you talk, you set a time, set time to talk and say your piece in a nice way, and say it on the table, present it on the table. And that is one way of being assertive. Hindi naman siguro magkakaroon ng violent reaction or to the point na kailangan magkaroon ng mga exchange of hurtful words. But also, ako din, sa aking experience about this is, you always, if that personal conversation is not good enough, the next conversation, you bring someone in that is more objective to see things. So let's say it could be your facilitator, it could be your cell leader, it could be your pastor. So there's always an escalation where there's always a time where you need to escalate certain situations. Okay, so I guess I have answered all the questions. And again, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that you'll learn something today.
Yes, thank you so much po for all of your expert insight, Miss Jane. Alam niyo po, natutunan ko po talaga that as Christians, we must master our own emotions. No, it's normal, all of the emotions that we're feeling are normal and valid, but we must be masters of it. We've truly learned a lot po from your discussion up to the Q&A portion. Feeling ko po I'm a new person na after this, Cheska. Ikaw ba?
Tama yan. Ako din. Napaisip ka ako kung nagiging mindful ba ako whenever I am feeling yung mga intense emotion, o talaga bang nare-release ko lang agad without consideration for others. Nakita ko yun, may 4 types pala ng communication, Ira.
Yes. Kayo ba, participants, alam niyo din ba kung anong type of communicator kayo? Kindly comment down below, no, sa ating chat box.
Yes, feel free to chat. Okay lang, babasahin namin yan later. Ayan. So, we consider po a blessing, Miss Jane, na nakasama po namin kayo tonight. And marami po talaga kaming natutunan. And speaking of blessings, Ira, mamimigay din tayo ng blessings tonight in the form naman of raffle prizes. So,
Ready
ilan
na
ba
ang
magiging
ating
winners
participants?
natin?
There will be 4 winners to win this first round of raffle. 2 winner ng 100 pesos, 1 winner ng 200 pesos, at 1 winner ng 300 pesos. Kaya reminder lang po, sa lahat po ng mapipili na winner or sa ating wheel na matatapat na name, kindly say present po sa ating chat box para ma-recognize po namin kung nandito po kayo sa ating Zoom. Ayan.
Mas maganda kung mag-on cam sila at mag-hi. Wave tayo dyan.
Wave. Talagang active na active kami dito.
Tama. So, tignan natin kung sino unang mananalo. Ayan ang ating Wheel of Fortune. Ako, ang dami nag-register,
ang unang
Ira.
mananalo. Totoo yan. 300 plus ang nag-register. So, madami talagang names. So, the first winner ay 100 pesos.
So, sino kaya?
Tingnan natin. Mary Princess R. Borromeo.
So, andyan ba si Mary Princess?
Present. Kung nandyan po kayo.
So, hintayin natin, tingnan natin.
Magbibilang tayo ng 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At kung hindi pa siya nakakapag-comment, lilipat na tayo sa next na winner.
Tama.
Okay, Cheska, magbilang ka na para makalipat tayo.
Sige. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Naku, wala ta si Mary
Wala si Ate Mary. So, lipat tayo sa ating next winner ng 100 pesos. Taranan!
Ayan.
Emil Kent D. Roman. Shout out po sa inyo. Kung nandito po kayo sa ating Zoom, kindly comment present.
So, magbibilang ulit ako, Ira.
Okay, magbilang ka na, Cheska.
Baka kasi, wala rin siya dito sa ating webinar ngayon. Baka nakatulog na siya. Bilangan natin. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Next winner muna tayo. Asan na kaya ang mga to? Sayang naman.
Kaya sila. Nako, Cheska,
load din yan.
Daphne D. Tospe. 100
Andyan ba
pesos
si
winner.
Ate Daphne Crospe?
Kindly chat present kung nandito po kayo sa ating webinar.
Hingi na lang din natin yung help ng ating moderator sa webinar. Baka kasi nandito sila and hindi lang natin makita, Ira. So, magbibilang ulit ako ng 5. Countdown ng 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wala ulit, Ira. Feeling ko para sa akin talaga
Wala
to.
ulit. Alam mo, parang naisip ko nga, siguro yung mananalo na lang ay yung makakapagsabi ng complete na types of communicator.
Recitation pala. Ay, si
Recitation.
Ate Charis
Charisse
Bautista.
Bautista.
Andito ba tayo sa ating webinar tonight?
Andito daw si Ate Daphne. Nag-comment pa si Ate Daphne.
So, tignan natin ang ating chat box. So, si Ate Charisse Bautista, if
Ayan,
you're
si
here
Ate
tonight,
Daphne.
kindly
Si Ate Daphne ay
chat
nanalo
us.
ng 100 pesos.
Wow, congratulations, Ate Daphne. Hindi mo
Kindly
naman sinabi, nandito ka pala.
Oo nga, hindi natin
Nabilangan
nakita.
ka tuloy namin. Ayan, so next winner tayo. Magkano ulit ang prize ng ating winner ngayon?
So may nanalo na ng isa ng 100 pesos si Ate Daphne. The next is 100 pesos ulit.
Kay Tanya J.B. Santonino. So, andyan ba
Yan,
si
nandyan ka ba, Ate Tanya?
Tanya J? Oh, sa FB Live siya nanonood kanina.
Hello po.
Okay, so, andyan ba si Ate Tanya J? Kindly chat sa ating Zoom chat para ma-acknowledge namin na kayo ang makakakuha ng 100. So, bilangan ulit natin. 5,
Bilangan natin.
4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm so
Next
sorry,
winner
Ate
muna
Tanya.
tayo.
Next winner na tayo.
Okay, next. Ayan, sino kaya?
Sam
Si Sam Alison Dayaw. Parang nakita ko nag-chat si Sam Alison Dayaw kanina. So, nandito ka pa po ba tonight? Yes! Ayan, congratulations!
Congratulations po, 100 pesos.
Ayan.
Next is the winner of 200 pesos. So,
Okay,
iikot
winner
na
ng
natin ang
200
ating
pesos.
Wheel of Fortune.
For 200,
Marlena C. Barcala or
Barcala.
Barcala, kung ano mong pronunciation.
Ayan. So, nandito ba si Ate Marlena? Ayan, mukhang wala. Bilangan ulit natin. 5,
5, 4,
3,
2,
2, 1. Next winner muna tayo. Next winner.
Jocelyn R. Cuarto. Parang magka-apelido kami, Cheska. Ano ko ba ito?
Sino ba yan si Jocelyn R. Cuarto? Ayan.
Mukhang nanay ko yata ito Congratulations, Mom.
Ayan, nanalo po kayo ng 200, Tita Joy.
200 pesos.
Nanonood ata sa FB Live si Tita Joy.
Ayan, so since meron na tayong winner ng 200 pesos, 300 pesos naman.
Yes.
Sino kaya ang ating winner?
For 300, si Maricel R. Fagel. So, kindly chat po sa ating Zoom chat kung nandyan po tayo tonight.
Maricel R. Fagel.
Naku, mukhang wala
Parang
siya
wala
sa
si
ating
Ate Maricel.
webinar. So, 5,
Let's read.
4, 3, 2, 1. Next winner muna tayo.
Next winner. 300 din to, guys.
Kaya nga, parang 3 days na internet load na to, ay.
2 milk tea na to, Cheska.
Oo, diba? Sayang din. Ayan si
Jonalyn
Jonalyn
C. Guamos.
Nakita ko tayo nag-comment to, alam ko eh. Hello po Ate Jonalyn. If you're still here, kindly chat in po sa ating Zoom chat to recognize po yung
Kindly
winner
chat
natin.
present po kung nandito po kayo sa ating webinar tonight.
Parang nakita ko siya nag-comment eh. Pero hintayin natin ang kanyang message or chat. Hello po.
Okay, nasa Zoom daw si Ate Jonalyn. So, ibibigay natin sa kanya itong win na to.
Yes,
Baka-
congratulations.
Congratulations, everyone. And just a reminder po, no, kindly send us your full name and your contact number, GCash number, sa ating email, which is gia.fairview. Ayan, nakikita po sa ating screen, no? gia.fairview1997@gmail.com.
Yes, congratulations sa ating first set of winners. Kung hindi po kayo napili ngayon, don't worry, meron pa po tayong chance later kasi magpaparaffle po ulit tayo. But now to proceed with the next part of our program, we'd like to introduce our second speaker for tonight. She is a social worker in Baltimore, Maryland, focused on empowering vulnerable populations, specifically persons experiencing homelessness, addiction, and/or poverty, and returning citizens through direct services, coalition building, and advocating. As a first-generation immigrant and Asian American, she is also engaged in issues affecting immigrants and minority communities. She serves on the board of directors of Youth with a Mission and is engaged in multiple coalitions, including the National Coalition for Homelessness Solutions, Greater Baltimore Grassroots Criminal Justice Network, and the Women's Coalition of Maryland.
To discuss the topics honing healthy communication and enhancing empathy for others, ladies and gentlemen, from Jesus is Alive Glendora, Miss Sounds Lyra Rojas. Hello po,
Virtual
Miss
clap.
Sounds. Virtual clap, everyone.
Hello, good morning. Morning pala. Morning sa amin ni Tita Jane. Good evening.
Yes
sa,
po,
Good morning
good
po.
mga, I think 12 hours ahead kayo sa akin. I am in Baltimore, Maryland. Pero yung home church ko is Glendora, which is church ng daddy ko, Pastor Manny Rojas. And so they're 3 hours behind pa sila doon. So tulog pa sila, mommy at daddy doon. But they wish Gia Fairview happy anniversary on their behalf daw. Kaya, so very excited to be here. Very excited na always excited ako pag pinag-uusapan natin ng mental health sa church because it's so important. And I think, you know, anak ako ng pastor, so I grew up in church, I grew up in youth ministry, I grew up in Sunday school, lahat yon. So I love that we are talking about mental health because I really believe that God cares about our emotional health and our mental health, and that I think it's encouraging na pinag-uusapan natin. So I will be doing this in Taglish, pero if I am speaking too fast, just let me know. Just raise your hand in the chat. I will slow down or adjust. But today we are talking about healthy communication, and I think yung basis ng understanding natin, or at least my understanding of communication. If you go to the next slide, communication is really the foundation of all of our relationships, right? If you think about it, your relationships are built on communication. Kung wala kang communication sa isang tao, then your relationship is pretty non-existent, right? Like every relationship that you have, even yung mga casual lang, like si Manong sa jeepney, right? That's a communication when you hand him your fee, or when you're entering and saying hello. Those are communications that happen in our day-to-day life. Then obviously yung mga relationships natin that are a bit more obvious, yung mga work relationships, home relationships, school relationships, all of those require communication. And so communication is the foundation of all of our relationships. And so when you think about yung mga aspects that make up a relationship or a healthy relationship, like trust and honesty and love and respect, all of those are built by communication. Communication can build up or break down trust, love, hope. If you are lacking in communication, o kaya pinag-usapan ni Tita Jane earlier, if your communication is aggressive, then it could break down that trust. It could break down love. It could break down respect in a relationship. If you are using healthy communication, it can build trust. It can build hope. It can build respect within a relationship. So it really is powerful. A powerful tool in our relationships. So it's important to learn how to communicate in a healthy way. So we talk about effective listening as a way to build healthy communication. Next slide, po. Yeah, healthy communication begins with effective listening, because you can say all of the right words. Later on, pag-uusapan natin what's the right thing to say and examples of the right things to say, but you can say all of the right things. And if you are not effectively listening, then you are not effectively communicating, because it is only one-sided. Communication requires listening and speaking, right? So we'll take a look at a verse real quick before we jump in. I think the next slide is James 1:19-20 says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." So the Bible tells us we must be swift to hear, slow to speak. Sabi ng Bible, dapat you should listen first before you speak. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think next slide. When you're using effective listening, you are showing that you care about the person. It breaks down defensiveness and shows that you are looking to understand the other person, and if there's conflict, to resolve that conflict. And so the three parts of effective listening that we're going to talk about today is engaged nonverbal language, active listening, and then reflecting back. So starting with engaged nonverbal language. So what does that mean? What is nonverbal language? That is everything that you are not saying, right? Like effective listening, habang nakikinig tayo, our bodies are speaking. So engaged nonverbal language, it includes, I think meron pang one more slide, includes facing the speaker. So when you are talking to somebody, you're facing them. Yung posture natin and the tone that we speak, and then yung having eye contact and nodding, that you're showing that you are understanding, that you are listening, na engaged ka. Because when you're not engaged, kunwari nag-uusap tayo tapos doon ka nakatingin sa iba, or galit ka sa tao, so you're like rolling your eyes, o kaya yung anong tawag doon sa Tagalog, bintang hininga, something like that. Yung pag nakikinig ka nga, hindi ka nga nagsasalita, pero yung nonverbal language mo naman, naka-cross yung arms mo, hindi ka nakatingin, o kaya puro nag-iintay ka lang para matapos yung isang tao. That is not effective listening. Kahit hindi ka nagsasalita, your body speaks. Your body is saying something. And if you are crossing your arms, nag-roll ka ng eyes mo, or nag-shake ka ng head mo kasi nagdi-disagree ka sa sinasabi nila, then that is not effective listening, and it is communicating dun sa isang tao na hindi ka interesado sa sinasabi nila, na defensive ka na agad. So they're not going to want to be open. They're not going to want to be vulnerable with you. So effective engaged nonverbal language shows na nagpe-pay attention ka sa taong nagsasalita, especially pag nag-share sila ng something very vulnerable and something very deep. You know, sinabi mo, mukhang down na down ka, anong nangyayari sa'yo? And then nagbigin mag-open up yung tao, tapos hindi mo naman sila tinitingnan, hindi ka naman nakikinig. So why would they be open with you, di ba? So you need to practice nonverbal language and body language that is positive, that shows the other person nakikinig ka. Also, just warning, meron akong aso, and it's around the time na pinipick up nila yung trash sa labas ng apartment. So pag maingay siya, that's why. Okay, next slide. So when it comes to active listening, actually, Ate Ira, paki-message nyo na lang ako sa chat, like if there's 5 minutes left, because I know we're a little off time, just to make sure. So active listening includes not interrupting somebody, di ba? Pag sinabi mo sa kanila, sis, mag-share ka naman ng like, anong nangyayari sa'yo? Like medyo mukhang depressed ka, medyo down ka. Let them speak. Let them speak don't interrupt them with your own words or interject yung experience mo. Let them, you're saying you're creating a space for them to be vulnerable. So let them be vulnerable and take their time. Not holding judgments, pinag-usapan to ni Tita Jane earlier, na sometimes, pag yung tao na yon, like, meron ka ng lens sa kanya of how you understand them kasi nagkaaway kayo in the past or whatever. So pag pinapakinggan mo sila, yun na yung lens na iniisip mo sa kanya and hindi ka na open to listen to them, then that's not really showing active listening. So you have to hold your judgments and just allow the person to speak and talk about their experience. And also meaning don't hold judgments, kunwari, nag-share sila sa iyo about a mistake na ginawa nila, and maybe that mistake is really embarrassing and that mistake is really mali talaga yung ginawa nila. But in that moment, when you are listening to them, you need to create a space that does not judge them, a space that is trying to understand bakit nila nagawa yung ginawa nila, and letting them talk through it, right? So don't hold judgments. Parang similar to that, don't jump to conclusions on your own na siguro ginawa nito ganun, siguro kasi ang nangyari ganun. Because in our head, like yung mga tao kasi, we don't like tension, we don't like conflict. So in our head, ang first like immediate reaction natin, we want to solve it, we want to figure out what happened, we want to problem solve right away. Pero when we are trying to actively listen, you don't want to jump to a conclusion kasi pag kakasimula nyo lang mag-usap, pero decidido ka na sa anong nangyari, then you're not going to be open to listen to the other person's experience. And that's connected to the fourth thing, which is listen to understand, not to respond. Paminsan, especially kung nag-aaway tayo o kaya may disagreement sa isang tao, we are listening and in our head, pinapakinggan natin sila. Hindi pa tayo nagsasalita, pero in our head, iniisip na natin, sinabi niya to, ang counter-argument ko naman is, na. Sinabi niya to, iko-correct ko yun kasi hindi naman tama yung ganun. And in reality, hindi ka naman nakikinig. You're not listening to the other person. You're only listening to defend yourself, to respond right away. And even sometimes kahit hindi argument, somebody is sharing something to you na very deep, very sensitive. And then sometimes, especially, in serious things, you want to say the right thing. So iniisip mo, what do I say to this person? How do I make sure na I say the right thing na hindi ako mag-mess up, ganun. But at the same time, they need you to listen before you know you won't know what the right thing to say is if you are not listening to them, diba? So making sure you are listening to understand, not to respond. So part of that is you can ask questions, and it's okay to say, hey, I need to get more clarification about this part, and I want to make sure that I understand. And it's also okay to be silent. So we don't like silence. Okay, Ate Ira, we don't like silence, but sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you don't have to talk. Sometimes it's okay to be silent, especially if you're thinking or the other person is thinking. It doesn't mean anything negative. You can be silent with a purpose. So next slide. When we are reflecting back as a part of active listening, part of what you want to do, you can paraphrase or summarize. And what you are paraphrasing or summarizing is the content. So anong nangyari, yung feelings na nafe-feel ng isang tao, maybe yung thoughts nila na naiisip, or overall meaning. So you can use words like, I want to make sure I'm understanding. It sounds like you felt really betrayed. I want to make sure I'm understanding. Is this what happened? Tapos you reflect back everything that happened. From what I understand, it seems that you felt like your feelings were hurt. Like you are trying to reflect back, and then you say, let me know if I misunderstood. Is that correct how I understood that? Because when you reflect it back to them, nakikita nila, one, you listened. Number two, you are interpreting properly. Because sometimes nasabi ko, oh, from what I understand, it sounds like you felt hurt. And sabihin lang, no, I don't think I felt that way. I felt this. And that way they have a chance to correct it as well. And it shows that you're empathizing with them. You are trying to understand what they are going through. And then the next slide, the barriers to effective listening. Sometimes what keeps us from listening well is defensive tayo, especially when it comes to conflict, right? Like we don't want to listen to the other person. We just want to make sure na tama tayo at tayo yung mananalo dito, right? Or sometimes dinideflect natin and we make it, oh, that's just about you. That is your experience. It's your fault. Or sometimes gusto natin mag-relate, so we jump straight to our experience. Like, oh, like, na-reject ako dun sa nursing program ko. Oh yeah, this one time na-reject din ako dito, kaya alam na alam ko yung nafe-feel mo. Which is like, the thought is positive, pero pag nagja-jump ka straight sa experience mo, it's possible that the person on the other side doesn't feel like biglang naging about you agad yung conversation. So it's not to say that you shouldn't relate to them, but there is a time for that and when it's appropriate. And so you don't want to jump straight into that, because then it feels like ginawa mong about you yung conversation. And then we're just gonna go quickly through these. When it comes to conflict resolution, effective listening, so all those parts we talked about earlier, that is the key to conflict resolution. So there's 5 ways that people address conflict, and they're kind of merong purpose sa kanila at each time. So avoiding conflict, people who avoid conflict all the time. So it could be situational, that you just use this type, depende sa situation. And then there's people who just use this across every single conflict, right? So avoiding is kind of the one that you don't want to be all the time. Yung avoiding, yung parang sinasabi ni Tita Jane earlier na, biglang hindi ka na umattend kasi na-offend ka. So in-avoid mo na lang yung situation, hindi ka na lang umattend, right? So the proper situation where you can probably use avoiding is to postpone it. You should only use avoiding to postpone actually resolving the conflict. Kunwari, nagkaroon kayo ng misunderstanding, pero nasa middle ka ng meeting or nasa middle ka ng Bible study, it might not be the right time to address it right now. So you can avoid it right now, but you have to make sure mag-come around ka later to resolve it. And then there is accommodating, where usually these people, yung mga tao na ginagamit accommodating, they're very self-sacrificial. And you can probably use that kung yung outcome ng conflict, like talagang you don't care what the outcome is, like kung wala ka talagang preference sa outcome, kunwari, this is a very basic example, but kunwari, like may misunderstanding kayo sa I don't know, very basic, sa color ng dingding, right? You're painting a wall, nag-disagree kayo sa color ng dingding. At the end of the day, you don't care what color the wall is, so you can accommodate the other person who cares so much what the color of the wall is. That's a very basic example, but shows you that's like, you use accommodating, but you don't really care about the end result. If you really care about the end result, you should resolve the conflict. So there is a compromising conflict resolution where mutual yung benefit, you both kind of sacrifice a little bit. And then there is competing, where you don't care about the other person's feelings, you just want to win. So that's also not a healthy a healthy way to address conflict. The best way to address conflict is collaborating. This is even better than compromising. Collaborating is a mutual process where you are both happy with the end result. So those are the 5 ways people address conflict. And then next slide. So we'll just go through this really quickly. The keys to positive resolution na ma-solve yung conflict includes effective listening, like we were talking about. Number 2, seeking to understand, not to win. We were talking about that earlier. If you really, really need to win, think about, bakit ko ba kailangan talaga manalo? And is there a way for me to explain this that is not disregarding of the other person? Number 3, clarify the issue. What are you really fighting about? Talaga bang nag-aaway kayo kasi because somebody left the dishes in the sink, hindi sila naghugas ng plato? Or are you really arguing because you don't feel like anybody is helping you around the house? Are you really arguing kasi hindi ka nakasama sa hangout? Or are you arguing kasi you really felt left out? You need to clarify the issue because sometimes it's not about the one thing that happened. Thoughts versus feelings, pinag-usapan din natin to ni Tita Jane earlier. You can validate the thoughts, the feelings, but like Tita Jane said earlier, we have feelings because we are people, but the thoughts behind the feelings, that's what you need to correct. So if you feel that you are being left out, and the thought that you are being left out, like the feeling is I feel left out. The thought is that nobody cares about me. The thought is what you need to correct. When you correct your thought, you can correct the feeling. 5, focusing on the issue and not the person. Don't personalize everything. Like Tita Jane was saying earlier, it's not always about you. So don't personalize every single conflict. Number 6, don't make assumptions, like we were talking about earlier, not jumping to conclusions. And 7, follow up. Pag naka-resolve na kayo ng conflict in a few days, say, hey, it's been a few days. Okay pa rin ba tayo sa naging solution natin? Is this still working? Because sometimes it stops working. So you need to find a new solution. So make sure you are still following up. Sorry, we jumped through all of that, but I want to make sure we stay on time as much as possible, because at the end of the day, this is just the beginning. You have some tools. We talked about some tools, but at the end of the day, it requires practice. The first time you try effective listening, you're not going to be the best at it. You can practice over and over in the same way that you want to show grace to other people, show grace to yourself as you are learning and practicing these things. And if you mess up, okay lang na sabihin, you know what, kanina nung nag-respond ako sa'yo, it wasn't the best, it wasn't respectful, I want to try again. It's okay. Like, we need to put our pride aside and try and try our best and acknowledge if we didn't do something right. But yeah, so that's kind of a very quick gist of healthy communication and conflict management. And there's a bunch of resources online as well that talk about this if you want to learn more about effective listening, if you want to learn more about conflict management. But the real thing is, it takes practice. It's not something you can read about it as much as you want, but you need to practice it.
Thank you, Ms. Songs, for that very insightful discussion on our second topic. Sa ating participants naman, you can type down what struck you the most from this discussion on healthy communication. Alam mo yung, Cheska, yung discussion ni Ms. Sounds very concise, nakuha natin lahat ng gist na kailangan nating makuha. So ikaw naman, Cheska, i-communicate mo naman sa amin yung mga realizations mo.
Actually, super ganda talaga kasi one sentence pa lang na-encapsulate na talaga kung paano ba yung healthy communication. Kasi yun nga sabi ni Ms. Soms, healthy communication starts with effective listening. And yung pinaka-tumatak talaga sa akin, one thing siguro na characteristic ng effective listening na medyo na-overlook natin is yung non-verbal language. Siyempre, we would want na the people na we communicate with talagang engaged sa conversation na we're having. So, dapat nakatingin siya sa akin. Kaya pala minsan na-feel ko pag may kausap ako, tas parang hindi siya nakatingin sa akin, feel ko wala na siyang paki sa sinasabi ko. Parang kahit no, tumatango siya tapos sasabi niya, oo, tama, tama. Pero hindi naman siya nakatingin sa akin, walang eye contact. So parang na-invalidate yung mga sinasabi ko or yung feelings ko. And also yung listening to understand, not to respond. So yun yung kailangan nating i-keep in mind palagi, no? Na kailangan natin isipin kung ano ba talaga yung sinasabi ng person. Not yung ano lang yung gusto nating ibigay dun sa person. Kasi sometimes people open up to us not really to seek yung insights mo or yung suggestions mo on what to do. Gusto lang nila ng someone who would truly listen and try to understand their
Yes, that's
feelings.
right. Alam mo, sabi nga dito ni Miss Christine, no? Ito din yung pinaka natutunan ko, in order to correct the feeling, one's thought must be corrected first. And sabi din ni
Yes.
Kuya Eman and ni Ate Ann, no? Listen. I'm sorry. Can you read yung sinabi ni Kuya Eman and ni Ate Ann? Okay, medyo nawala na siya.
Sige, hanapin natin yan. Pero naaalala ko lang din, lagi ko nga sinasabi with like my friends, pag nag-uusap-usap kami, sasabihin ko, huwag tayo mag-overthink, guys. Kasi doon nagsisimula yung mga negative na emotions natin eh.
That's right.
Totoo, di naman pala yun yung totoong nangyayari, di ba? Parang nag-overthink lang talaga tayo.
And Cheska, that's very well said. Pero let's reserve all the questions after the last topic, no? Kung meron tayong mga questions and yung mga questions na sinend natin sa ating registration form, tatanong natin yan later kay Miss Soms after the last topic. And siya rin yung speaker about empathy naman. So, finally, no, to tackle the topic, enhancing empathy for others, let us give the floor back to Miss Soms.
Yun, unmute. Ayun, thank you. So, a lot of yung pag-usapan natin when it comes to empathy is it requires yung healthy communication as well. Yeah. So when showing empathy and compassion for somebody requires healthy communication and effective listening as well. So a lot of yung basis that we just talked about. But we'll start here with this verse. I wanted us to start 1 Corinthians 13. So it says, this is the verse that comes before yung those love verses that they read sa mga weddings, ganon. This comes before all of that. So all of the love is kind, love is patient, love is like that whole verse. This comes before that. So it says, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. So this verse is saying, whatever you are doing, kahit you can speak the tongues of men and the tongues of angels, kung wala kang love, you are just a sounding cymbal. Maingay ka lang. And if you have the gift of prophecy, if you have all the faith that you can move mountains, pero wala kang love, you are nothing. And if you give everything away to charity, if you give yourself so self-sacrificial, pero wala kang love, it profits me nothing. And then it turns into love is patient, love is kind. So what is love? And so, but I love that it begins with that, because often pag pinabasa natin yung 1 Corinthians 13, we always jump to love is kind, love is patient. But this first verses really sets up that passage of why love is important, why love has to be the foundation. And it's the same thing here. Love is the foundation of empathy. And that's why I love na pinag-uusapan natin sa church ang mental health, because it shows that church is focused on loving others well, right? Like yun yung parang catchphrase na sinasabi natin in church all the time, like, oh, I love God and I love people. Love God, love people. Well, this is one of the ways we love people, is by showing empathy. One of the ways that we love people is responding to their mental health. So I love that the church is doing things like this, so that we can show, you know, the people that come to our church and the world, that we care about them as a person. And so one of the things that I think na sinabit sa question that I wanted to address while we were here in the presentation was, how can the church respond to mental health issues? And I think with this verse as a basis, like having love as our foundation, this is how the church responds to mental health issues, by talking about it, just like we're talking about it right now, because it shows people we care about this. We are talking about it because we care about it. And then within ministry, you want to be able to show love and empathy to sa mga ministry head and the people who serve, because they are serving your church. They are working for the work of the kingdom, for the work of the Lord. So you want to make sure that you are showing them that same empathy as well, and setting boundaries, because church work is really difficult work, right? Like if you ask pastors, if you ask ministry leaders, it's not always fun and games. It's not always raffles. It's not always the best. Like yung mga taon dito, like you guys are seeing the fruit of the labor that went into this seminar. You are seeing the fruit of weeks and weeks of maybe like months and months of thinking about this, of putting in the hard work. And so it's not easy. It's not easy work. And so showing empathy to within our own church as well is helpful. And so how do we support people with mental health issues? The reality is, one of the things na gusto ko i-point out is the statistic is 1 in 4 people experience mental health issues. So kung 100 tayo dito or 300 nag-register, a good amount of us have had experiences with mental health issues. And if you haven't, you know, like be grateful, but at the same time, life is life, and there will be things in life that challenge you. There will be things in life that challenge your health and mental health. And so part of showing empathy is knowing that we all go through this. And so showing empathy is different than sympathy, kasi empathy shows compassion and understanding, whereas sympathy is more yung parang kawawa lang yung isang tao. And part of showing empathy is understanding what you're looking for. And we talked about, one of the other questions is, how do you know when somebody is going through a mental health issue? A lot of it is very similar symptoms, where people have a feeling of helplessness or hopelessness. People who are experiencing mental health issues usually are losing interest in the things that used to interest them. Nag-isolate sila, merong changes sa sleep, sa appetite, sa weight. Nagiging irritable sila in their mood, a loss of energy. And then sometimes there's also physical manifestations of mental health issues, like actual, sumasakit yung ulo, sumasakit yung leeg, sumasakit yung likod. Sometimes there is a physical expression of that as well. And then so you also want to show empathy. You also want to set boundaries, right? Because and people say, well, how does setting boundaries for me create is supportive to somebody with mental health issues? And I'll tell you why. Because if you don't set boundaries for yourself and you are only saying, sorry, obviously it's the morning here, nandito yung araw sa mukha ko. If you are setting boundaries for yourself, that is a way to support somebody. Because what you don't want to do is say, whenever you need me, I will be right here. Tapos yung isang beses na tinawagan ka, hindi ka sumagot. Right? So if you have limitations, you have boundaries, you need to tell that to the other person, because I'm just going to switch here. You need to tell that to the other person, because if you overpromise and tell them, oh, kahit anong kailangan mo, nandito ako, pero hindi mo naman talaga kailangan kasi may other engagement ka or you have other commitment, then what you are doing is setting them up to basically believe Oh, sabi na yung dito sa akin, pero yun pala, hindi. So you are emphasizing make sure you have set your own boundaries so that you know what your limitations are and the other person knows what your limitations are, that you are honest about that. Number 3, be patient. Mental health issues don't get resolved overnight. And so if you are walking alongside with somebody who has mental health issues, just know that it's not going to be solved overnight. Sometimes you have to walk with them for a while. And then the other one is to offer help. So sometimes when somebody is going through depression, going through a really difficult time, they are sometimes not, paminsan nakakalimutan nila kahit maligo, kahit kumain, nakakalimutan nila yung basic chores. So sometimes you can offer help by saying, hey, I know you're going through a really difficult time. Magda-drop off lang ako ng lunch para sa'yo so that we know na nakakain ka today. Or, hey, alam ko ang dami mong iniisip ngayon. Why don't I stop by? I'll watch the kids for a little bit. Why don't I stop by? Ako maglinis ng bahay, just to get something off of their plate. So even just basic things like that, if you don't feel like you have the you don't have to solve the whole thing, but even doing something as simple as that can be helpful. I'm going to move one more time. And then the other one is to encourage help. So you can offer your own help, but then also encourage them to seek help. Because at the end of the day, tao lang din naman tayo. So if you think that their mental health issues have progressed enough or are serious enough, it's okay to say, hey, I really feel like I've helped you as much as I can. I really think you should consider seeking a therapist. That happened to me before na meron akong pinagdadaanan, meron akong cell leader, and I was explaining to my cell leader everything that was happening. And, she was supportive. And then at one point, sinabi niya, hey, I think it's time for you to consider going to therapy because I'm here and I want to help, but I think you also need a bit more professional help. And so she actually paid for me. Na binayaran niya yung therapy sessions ko for 5 months for me to be able to do that. So you want to also, that's part of setting your boundaries, is knowing when you are at your limit and when it's okay, like when it's time to also call in professional help. And that doesn't mean that, oh, nakita ko na I started seeing a therapist, biglang nawala yung cell leader ko. No, she was still there, pero na-acknowledge niya, I think it's time for you to seek more professional help. I've helped you as much as I can. And that's okay also. So I just wanted for us to build that kind of foundation before we talk about actual examples of helpful things to say. And so if you go to the next slide, these are actual, the next slides are actual things that you can use to say to somebody when they are in distress, when they are having a panic attack, when they've told you, I'm going through something really difficult. These are things that you can say. So you can say, do you want to talk about it? I think sometimes ina-assume natin, they want to talk about it. They want to spend the next 3 hours talking about this. Pero sometimes they don't need to talk about it right now. They just need somebody there, right? Earlier we talked about purposeful silence. And sometimes, especially when in the immediate crisis, when somebody is crying hysterically, they don't have the capacity to talk about it right now. They just need somebody to be there with them, to hold their hand, to rub their back while they're crying. You don't always need to jump to, let's talk about it right now. It's okay to wait. It's okay to be there with them and while they are going through that. The second question you can ask is, and notice most of these are questions, right? They're not assuming anything of anybody. They are not making a decision by yourself. So you can ask them, are you looking to vent? Ibig sabihin, kailangan mo lang ba magsalita just to release it? Or are you looking for advice? A lot of times we want to jump to the advice. A lot of times gusto natin agad sabihin, well, you should do this and this is probably how you should solve it, which is fine, good intention, pero sometimes they just need to release first and maybe they're not ready for advice yet. Or maybe alam na nila anong kailangan nilang gawin, but they just need to release it first to somebody as well. The third one is also a question. What can I do to help? So they instead of exactly, we can ask them what they need instead of assuming, oh, you probably need this. You probably need you probably need to go to talk to that person that you're having a fight with, or you probably need to nagbibigay tayo agad ng gusto natin nilang gawin, but the best way is for us to say, what can I do to help? Because kung ang help na binibigay mo is not the kind of help they need, then it's just better if we ask them first, what do they need? Ano ba sa tingin mo where you are right now? Anong kailangan mo? Ano ang kailangan mong tulong? What would be the most helpful? Is it helpful for you if I stay here? Is it helpful for you to have some time alone? Is it helpful for you to go for a walk? Ask them what they need and let them come up with that solution. And then the next thing, you can just say, hey, I really appreciate you sharing. That was a really difficult thing that you shared. Paminsan, they might say something really deep and you might be thinking, oh, ano sasabihin ko? You can just say, thank you. That was really difficult for you to share. I can tell na nahirapan ka i-share yun. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and being honest with me, because it at least shows them that you were listening, that you do care about what they said. 5, you can use something that is validating. That sounds really hard. That sounds like that was really hard for you. That sounds like you, because again, even if the thought process is incorrect, at the end of the day, they felt hurt, right? Even kung na-misinterpret nila or masyado nilang pinersonal yung situation, at the end of the day, they feel hurt. So you can say, it sounds like you feel really upset and I'm really sorry you feel that way. Because you can say that you felt sorry for them without saying you're right or you're wrong. There's no way you should be feeling hurt right now, because that's not what happened. You totally misinterpreted. Because when you go to that defense problem solving mode, it can shut down the other person. Another thing you can say and ask them is, what helps you cope? So again, this is not assuming na alam mo what's the best for them, but it's saying, oh, in the past, nung naging depressed ka, or in the past, nung nagkaroon ka ng kahirapan, what did you do to cope back then? Is that something you can do now? Sabihin nila, oh, before pag depressed ako, usually I feel better when I take some time to myself, or before when I was burnt out, it usually helps if I take a break, if I take a walk. Oh, okay, like that's great that was helpful last time. Is that something you can try this time, right? So help them think about what works for them in the past. And one other thing you can say is, I'm here if you need me. And just knowing that you are available, knowing that you are there for them, and again, affirming that they can come to you. So those are like some very basic things that you can use as starter points. It's very, I'm looking at the chat. In the Philippines, when we seek for help, akala nila mental health problem agad. Let's talk about normalizing, talking to experts about mental health. Yes, we'll talk about this some more, I think, in one of the Q&As. And so those are some of the things that you can start with. And there are also some things that you can avoid. So we'll talk about that next. So you can avoid saying things, doing things that minimize. You can advance to the other slide. You can avoid minimizing their experience. Ibig sabihin oh, hindi naman yung ganun ka, oh, na-misinterpret mo lang yung sinabi ni ganon, hindi naman yun yung meaning niya, that sounds really bad, but it could be worse. Which sounds, again, well-meaning. All of these things are well-meaning, but can shut down the other person. You also want to avoid blaming at this time. So posible na talagang mali sila, na interpret nila ng mali, pinersonal nila or whatever, talagang meron silang nagawang mali. But at this time, you want to not focus on blaming. Instead, things that you can say instead of blaming is saying, how can we learn from this in the future, right? So it's not a way to be like, eh kasi ikaw, ganun, ganun, ganun. But it's a way to say, acknowledge, yeah, mali nga yung ginawa mo, but it happened. So how can we learn from it? Or just acknowledging, hey, mali nga yung ginawa mo, pero the fact that we are talking about it right now means that you acknowledge that and you want to do better in the future. You also want to avoid thinking that you can fix it for them, right? Like a lot of times, especially kung close sa atin yung tao, you wanna just fix it. You don't want them to be going through what they're going through. But sometimes it's not something that can be fixed. Sometimes, and even, you know, in therapy, yung therapist ko will never be like, I think you should do this. My therapist is always asking me questions and helping me come to my own conclusions. Never siya nagsasabi, you should absolutely do this, and this is the only right way. And sometimes tatanungin ko siya, sasabihin ko, what do you think is the right thing to do? And she'll turn it around back to me and say, well, in this situation, like how do you know that it's the right decision? When you make the right decision, how do you know it's the right decision? So she will never make a decision for me or fix it for me, but she helps me think through the decisions and think through my own solutions that way I feel like I fixed it myself, if that makes sense. And then the other thing we talked about is to avoid overpromising. So again, overpromising that well, if you call me anytime, I'm gonna be there. Because again, one time that they call you and you're not there, it enforces their fear that nobody is there for them. So it's okay to say like, hey, I'm always here if you need me. Hey, on Sundays, I'm really busy in the morning. So if I don't get to answer you, I'm going to answer you right after I finish what I was doing. And that's okay to have your own boundaries, because it then tells them, you know, kasi kunwari, may tinext ka na sinabi mo, tinext mo tong isang tao, hey, this is what I'm going through, I really need help. Tapos hindi sila sumagot. The fear in our brain goes to, ay, hindi yan sumasagot kasi you're too much. Hindi yan sumasagot kasi na-annoyed na yan sa'yo. Hindi na yan sumasagot kasi galit na yan sa'yo. Right? Whereas if you tell the person and say, hey, I'm really busy today, but you can always feel free to text me. I'll get to it as soon as possible. If I'm not responding, it's just because I have a busy day today, right? So it helps them calm down those fears, because a lot of times when people are in mental distress, their fear is what is in the front. And then when it comes to, we're gonna close on this, keeping an unconditional positive regard, and just having this unconditional thought about somebody. You know, when I was thinking about this section of of this program, I was really just kept going back to, in order to have unconditional a positive regard for somebody, we need to remember that they are made in God's image, right? Everything that we're going to talk about. So the first one is having complete acceptance and love. If you don't have the basis that somebody is made in God's image, kahit anong ginawa nila, if you don't have the basis foundation that they are made in God's image, it's going to be really hard to keep a positive regard about somebody, especially if that person did you wrong, right? And then in remembering that they are made in God's image, you are reflecting God's love for them. And the second one says that nothing they do they do or not do can make them unlovable. And that's the love that God shows us, right? That there is nothing that we can do or not do that makes us not God's children, that makes us unlovable. And so that's just reflecting the love of God to them. The third is assuming the best of the person, because it's easy to just be like, oh, kasi siguro ginawa nila yun, siguro hindi nila ako inimbita dun sa hangout kasi galit sila sa akin, kasi gusto lang nila yung click nila, ganun. But we really need to remember to expect the best of someone. It's easy to think the worst of someone. It's easy to think about the ways that they could do wrong. But if you assume the best intention of somebody, then it's harder to get mad at them. Instead of saying like, oh, hindi nila ako in-invite dun sa hangout kasi galit sila sa akin or kasi ayaw nila kasama ako. Like maybe it's just, you have to ask your question, is this true of their character? Based on what you know of them, is the thought that you're having true of their character? If usually yung tao na yon is kind and is understanding and accepting and usually inclusive, then if you remember that about their character, then it's easier to remember their best intention. And you just want to make sure that you are meeting people where they are. And what that means is basically just being there for them exactly where they are, right? Like earlier we were talking about kung hindi sila ready for advice, don't give them advice. If they are not ready for a solution and just need somebody to listen, you have to meet them where they are, and then you can walk alongside them to where they need to get to. But if you don't meet them where they are, then you're expecting them by themselves to get to where you are, which is not always helpful. Yeah, I want to make sure we have time for the question and answer. So I'll just close in this. I want us to remember that 1 Corinthians verse, that love is the foundation of our empathy. Healthy communication is based out of love, and conflict resolution is based out of love. Love has to be our foundation, or diba sabi ng 1 Corinthians, without it, we are nothing. And all of these things that we talked about today, they are just tools and our starting point for us. And I guess one of the thoughts that I want to leave you with today is like, whatever you are experiencing, or whatever your friends, your coworkers, your whatever people in your life that you have relationships with, whatever you are experiencing, God calls the weary and the heavy laden towards him. So if you have feelings of being depressed, if you have feelings of anxiety, like God calls you to him. And the church should be the safest place that we can come with our fears, with our sadness, with our feelings of distress. Like the church should be where we can come and receive empathy and receive that love, receive that compassion and understanding. So that's what I want you to know, that in the church there is a space for you, that God has called you the weary, the heavy burdened. And it's, God doesn't look at it as like, ikaw talaga, you don't have enough faith, like how dare you be weary. No, God calls you to his presence. God calls you to his community, to his church at all times. But he especially says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy burden. And he has rest for us. He has what we need.
Yes. Thank you so much, Miss Doms, for imparting such invaluable knowledge through your discussions. And ako talaga sobrang tumatak sa akin na we are all here to reflect God's love to people. And oftentimes I find myself in situations where yun nga, I have someone na nag-go through these difficulties. Tapos iisipin ko, hala, anong sasabihin ko din sa person na to? Pero ang dapat nating isipin, kung what they need, not what we can give. So mag-focus tayo kung ano yung kailangan nila. And I know that you guys also have your takeaways then from the discussion.
Alam mo, Cheska, meron na akong nakita dito na tweetable na comment. Sabi ni Miss Christine, advice is not always advisable.
Tama. Yun nga yung sinabi ko rin kanina, di ba, na baka hindi naman kasi talaga niya kailangan ng advice, sis. And meron din dito, galing kay Christine Joy, you are not responsible nor obligated to help fix their problem. And meron din tayo dito, nag-type din siya, break the stigma, all we know is tao lang tayo, so our feelings and emotions are valid. Ikaw naman, Ira, ano bang natutunan mo from the discussion kanina ni Miss
Alam mo,
Tom?
Jessica, sobrang jump-pack talaga ng lesson ni Miss Songs. And
Totoo yan.
one thing na talagang na-realize ko is hindi tayo dapat yung nakikisimpatya lang or sympathize in English by saying, kaya mo yan, malalagpasan mo yan. Kasi that just means we only pity people and their situation and basta-basta lang tayo nagbibigay. No, we really must put our feet on their shoes. Hindi natin dapat sabihin na alam ko yung pinagdadaanan mo. Lalo na kung hindi talaga natin alam. Because we're different people with different thought processes and upbringing. No? Sometimes we just have to be there and be a quiet and supportive company. Let them feel what they have to feel. And that is true empathy.
Tama yan. Yun nga, may times na may mga friend ako na umiiyak about something eh hindi ko pa na-experience yun. So, sabay na rin akong umiyak.
Alam mo, iyak ka na sa akin, Cheska.
Oo, sabay
Iiyak mo na yan,
umiyak.
Cheska.
Ayan. So, at this moment, we will have another Q&A on honing healthy communication and enhancing empathy for others with none other than Miss Toms. So, the questions that we'll be asking are also selected beforehand. And the first one is, again, how can we as believers of Christ provide a safe space for those who are struggling with mental health issues without invalidating their feelings or misinterpreting the feeling as faithless?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, let's tackle that ending part. Yung having mental health issues being, pag sinabi natin, it's because you don't have enough faith, what that creates is a culture of guilt and shame. And that's not how the Holy Spirit works, right? Like the Holy Spirit can convict us, but the Holy Spirit is not guilting us or shaming us, right? So when we tell people that they have mental health issues because wala silang faith, it creates a culture of shame, actually. And then it also doesn't realize a lot of the stories in the Bible where people had struggle, right? Like, the stories in the Bible are not just like, oh, everything is great, nothing ever went wrong. A lot of stories in the Bible are everything went wrong, and then this is how we dealt with it, right? Like if you think about David, a lot of the Psalms, it expresses David's struggles, and a lot of them struggles, mental struggles, heart struggles that David has. He says all the time, his soul is weary, his heart is burdened. And then he always ends it with recognizing who God is. But at least it shows you that David was a man after God's heart, is what his nickname is. And David struggled with issues. And Jesus, there's a time when yung sa prayer at Gethsemane right before the cross, he said, my heart is heavy, and if this cup can pass from me, let it be so, but not my will, but your be done. But Jesus shares that his heart was burdened, right? So it's not that, not only do we have these because these struggles because we are human, but you see these stories in the Bible as well. It's not because we are a lesser human, but literally just because we are human, we have these struggles. And I think emotional honesty is a part of faith. I think even to the point that there are people who are questioning their faith, I actually think that sometimes that shows that they are thinking about their faith. And I think emotional honesty is a way to show faith, emotional honesty, and saying, this is what I'm struggling with, shows that you believe God and the church and your community, your faith community, is a safe place to show that, right? Because again, I'll say, if not the church, then where, right? People are going through mental health issues, and if they're not going to find comfort in the church, they're going to try to find it somewhere else. So that we should be creating a church culture that allows that vulnerability, because if we don't, they're going to try to find it somewhere else, right? And I think, that realization that everyone experiences emotions. That's what Tita Jane said earlier. We are human, therefore we have emotion. And so it's not, and what kind of world, like God created us to have emotion, because imagine what kind of world it would be if nobody had any emotion. About very flat, very not fulfilling, not helpful. And so as a church, we respond to mental health issues by continuing to talk about it, because again, it shows that we care about it. And then encouraging holistic care. That's one of the ways that you can encourage that it's not about them being faithless. So it's not just saying, well, you're experiencing depression, you should pray more. Like, yes, you should pray more. You should listen to worship music. You should do the things that help you. But that also includes spiritual, mental, and physical care. So yes, pray more. Also go on a walk. Also take some time to rest. Yes, pray more, but also practice some mindfulness exercises like Tita Jane was talking about. You need to encourage holistic care that includes spiritual, mental, and physical care as well.
Yes, thank you, Miss Songs. Are you done, Miss Songs?
Yeah.
Okay. Connected sa first question po is this somehow controversial question. How do you convince someone that one can have Jesus and a therapist at the same time?
Yeah, I think God made us for community. God made us to be with people. And in the same way that if you have diabetes, I would tell you to go to a doctor. If you have heart palpitations, I would tell you to go to a cardiologist. If you want to learn how to paint, I will tell you to go to a painter and an artist. If you want to learn how to play basketball, I would tell you to go somebody who knows about basketball. So if you want to learn about mental health, if you want to address your mental health, you should go to the mental health doctor, which is a therapist. You should go to the person, the professional who knows about it, so that you can learn from them, right? Like, I think so many times we just think like, oh, you just need to work on that. That's between you and God, right? But we don't tell that to somebody who's struggling with diabetes or with heart problems. Like, God made your body, so you take that up with God. No, right? We tell them to go to the doctor. Why? Because God exercises wisdom, God exercises healing through people, right? And so in the same way, you can have a therapist and believe in Jesus. There's also Christian therapists out there. You can have therapy and also love God. It's not a sign of faithlessness or turning away from God. If anything, seeking help from a therapist says, I have hope and I have faith that there is a solution for the problem that I am experiencing. Therefore, I'm going to go find it, right? And especially seeking a therapist who is faith-based, do that. But even if that is limited, some Christian therapist is either is sometimes a private, so it could be really expensive. But even the fact that you are seeking help, you are seeking to understand. And as therapists, if you say that faith is really important for you to how you solve your problems, we therapists, even if we don't exercise that faith, we have to acknowledge that faith is important to you and is a part of your solution process. So even kung hindi ako Kristiyano, but I am having therapy with somebody who is a Christian and tells me it's really important for me to include faith in my resolutions, I have to honor that. It's part of our ethical response. So you can make sure they know that. But I think at the end of the day, we're made for community. And in the same way that God empowers and works through doctors and other people, God can work through a therapist as well.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Toms. The third question po is, what can I do to avoid compassion fatigue?
Boundaries, 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 boundaries. You have to know your own boundaries. And I think, people who are empathizing people and people who want to help other people, it's really hard to set boundaries. But if you don't set boundaries, you will be burnt out. And then the thought of that, yung parang kung maging burnt out ka, then you're actually not able to help anybody. So boundaries is not selfish. Boundaries is actually saying, I know how much I can handle. And in order for me to help people, I need to know when to stop, because I don't, then I will be burnt out, and then I will be unable to help anybody, right? So boundaries is actually, boundaries make sure that you are still in a good, that you are not so burnt out that you actually can't help other people. And the main thing is you need to set your own boundaries, and you need to know what your limits are, and then you need to stick to them. And that includes avoiding compassion fatigue, includes there should be people that you are also seeking for help. So in the same way na yung mga tao pumupunta sa'yo para sa tulong, you should also have somebody na you can go to seek help for yourself. Because secondhand trauma is real, and that secondhand fatigue is also real.
I'd like to ask Ms. Soms, what are the practical ways we can do to set boundaries?
Yeah, so I think time boundaries are really easy. Ikaw lang ang may alam ng schedule mo. So you need to know like, oh, during this time talagang I work, so I can't answer calls can't answer calls or texts, or alam mo na I can only be available this many days. Like I say this to people in ministry, like don't just sign up for ministry every Sunday. Know that maybe, hey, two out of the 4 Sundays of the month I can serve. The other 2 Sundays I should be receiving. Setting time boundaries is really easy. Another way you can set boundaries is just if there is a topic that is too close for you, that is triggering your own negative experiences, you need to know what those are, because you can't help somebody if at the same time not to trigger yung past experience, traumatic experience mo din, because that's not helpful to either of you. So those are like the 2 easiest, like quickest, most common ways to set some boundaries. I think time and availability is the biggest one, because people feel like they need to be there 100% of the time, which again, the intention is good, but realistically, practically, it's not doable.
Thank you po, Ms. Soms, for that practical advices. And for the 4th question po, no, I think this is from a mom. How should a mother respond to an angry retort from an 18-year-old son?
Yeah, so this is like pag sinasagot ka, I think. And I'm not a mom, so I don't know it that well, but I know that it starts with your home culture, yung culture nyo sa bahay, and setting an example, because if they see you na sinasagot nyo din yung nagsasagutan din yung asawa, then that's the culture you are setting, right? And it's not, and so me, not as a mom, this is my advice as somebody who's not a mom, but I would say, kung sinagot ka ng anak mo, my first response would be, we don't speak to each other that way. We don't speak to each other disrespectfully. So do you need some time to be by yourself until you calm down? Do you need some time to be by yourself? Neither of us are ready to talk. Because if we can't talk with respect, then that means we're not ready to talk. So if you need some time and you need to step away, let's talk about this when you are ready. Because at the end of the day, you'll continue to hurt each other. Because sometimes I know, like, paminsan yung mga parents, they'll be like, well, you can't walk away from me. Like, you're not, wag mo ko layasan ng ganyan or whatever. But sometimes you need to walk away, because if you try to address that right now, you will just continue to disrespect each other. So I think you address it first by saying, that is not the culture of our home. We do not disrespect each other. So when you are ready to come back, we can talk about it when you're ready. But right now, kasi paminsan they're just heightened. And if you're trying to talk to somebody who's already up here, they're not gonna come down by talking some more. Sometimes they need some time away, and that can be okay. Like, I think paminsan, especially in the Filipino culture, we think na kailangan na natin pag-usapan to ngayon. But sometimes you need some time away Especially, if I was the parent, I would feel hurt. I probably don't want to talk about it right now kasi baka sisigawan ko lang din siya. And so sometimes you both need that time away. But I think it starts with setting that culture in your home, because you can't say we don't talk to each other disrespectfully if kung in reality nagsasagutan din naman pala kayo lahat. You know what I mean? So it starts with that culture at home, and I think it's okay to take some space. And then when you come back, using that effective listening, like we were talking about earlier, like, kanina sinagot mo ko ng like, you disrespected me. Can you tell me why you were angry? And I think, being open to listening to that person. And I think, yes, anak mo sila, but at the same time, they are human beings with emotion, and sometimes those emotions explode, and sometimes that looks like sagutan. So you can take a moment to stop, and then when you come back, use some of that effective listening to try to figure out ano talagang nangyari, right? Like, sinagot mo ba ako talaga dahil I was asking you to maghugas ng plato, or sinasagot mo ba ako kasi there's again focusing on the issue and clarifying what the actual issue is. Kasi sinagot ka ng anak mo because of something else, And so trying to figure out what is the underlying issue and using effective listening and effective communication to do that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Miss Sams. Talagang you directly and objectively answered, no? Even though medyo controversial, syempre, Filipino culture, sabi nga ni Miss Sams, home culture ng Filipinos, pero talaga nakakuha po kami ng practical answers. And it has really been an eye-opener, especially that we are trying to break stigmas on mental health issues, even inside churches.
Yes. Thank you so much, Miss Sams. Really appreciate the time na binigay niyo sa amin para paunlakan ng aming invitation tonight and to really speak about these issues and these topics. Super helpful po and timely po sa amin. And yan, we will now go to our raffle.
Ayan, Cheska. Very
Hindi ko
exciting
nakalimutan,
to.
Lyra.
Very exciting to dahil dalawa. Two blessed and favored winners ang mananalo ng 500 pesos.
Yes! Dalawa na ang
Ayan.
mananalo ng ating pag-grand prize.
So, wag po natin kalimutan na pag tayo yung napili or tumapat sa atin yung arrow, please tell present or chat na present kung tayo po yung nanalo.
Grabe,
For the
Ira,
first
500 to!
Ay, malaki yan sa Pilipinas, kahit medyo mataas ang inflation. Lourdes and Mandalupe. Tama ba? Maria Lourdes and Mandalupe. Nandito po ba kayo sa ating webinar?
Kindly chat po sa ating Zoom chat if present pa po tayo. So we can recognize you po and confirm na kayo nga ang nanalo ng ating 500 pesos.
Feeling ko, Cheska, kailangan mo na rin magbilang.
Oo nga, 500 din to. Kung hindi present si Ate Maria Lourdes, ibibigay natin siya sa ibang winner. So, bilangan natin.
Okay.
5, 4,
3,
2, and 1. Next winner. So, sayang.
Sayang ang 500. So, gising-gising po tayo at chat-chat.
Mark Anthony V. Cruz. Andyan ba si Mark Anthony? 500 pesos ang napanalunan mo.
500 pesos po ito. Kukunin na po ng host ito pag wala po kayo.
Oo, dalawa yung winners ng
dalawa
500.
ang winners. So, tig-isa tayo ng 500.
Oo, talent fee na pala yun.
Nako, kailangan na ulit nating magbilang.
Yes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nako, hindi pa rin
nakikling. Talaga, nako.
Ang unang 500. So, up for grabs started 2 na 500. So, sino kaya? Mark Clinton Somera. Naku, mukhang wala pa rin. Wala pa na. Ira, iuwi na natin to.
Iuwi na natin, Cheska.
Okay, so next na muna tayo. Kasi hindi ata present sa ating webinar tonight. So nakikita pala ng ating mga moderators kung nandito
Please
sila.
check lang kung nandito yung name nila.
Abigail
Abigail?
Manibog. Meron bang
Miss Abigail.
Abigail Manibog sa ating webinar? Wala pa rin daw.
Wala pa
daw,
rin.
Ira.
Ang tagal ng Ira ko.
Ira Porto, wala.
Siya ba yun? May nagtaas ng kamay dito.
Hindi na kaya.
Siya kay na our kwarto. Naku, nakakadalawang
Sayang.
kwarto na. Parang dalawa na yung kaapelido ko.
Konti na lang, Ira na
Congratulations
eh.
sa aking kambal. Siya kay na our kwarto, 500 pesos. So, for our last winner, 500 pesos last winner for this night.
Hindi na kaya. Huling mananalo ng 500.
Hindi po bias ito, ha?
Raya B. Parongan.
Raya B. Baka naisip nila, dalawa na yung kwarto, sabihin nila.
Kaya nga, nakikita nyo naman guys kung gaano kami
Oo.
kahirap maghanap ng winners, diba? Nagpapaikot kami ng paikot-ikot ng paulit-ulit.
Miss Raya,
Wala pa rin
Wala.
daw. Okay,
Wala
paikutin
daw.
ulit natin ng isa pang beses. Baka ito na yon, Ira. Baka may manalo
Ito
na
na
ng
yun,
last
ito
na
na yun.
500.
nararamdaman ko na yung pangalan ko.
Tingnan natin.
Eliezer S.
Eliezer.
Caico.
So, nandyan
Nandito
ba
ba
tayo?
siya sa ating chat? Say present lang po kung nandito kayo.
Sinisignalan ako ng ating host na wala daw.
Wala,
Ang ating
wala.
moderator na wala daw. So, di ba nakita nyo? Talagang naghahanap kami ng mananalo ng 500 pa. Baka, ayan, Justin Ariel Mendoza. Okay, may thumbs up ako makikita.
Ayan, may thumbs
So, kindly
up.
chat po kung nandito pa rin po tayo sa ating webinar. Para
Andito
ma-recognize
daw.
natin. Ayan, congratulations. Justin
Congratulations po.
Mendoza.
So, reminder lang po,
Yes.
no? Email us your Gcash number sa gia.fairview1997@gmail.com. And Cheska, no, to end this night,
Yes. Again, I'd like to congratulate all of our winners. So, congratulations sa mga nanalo sa ating paraffle kanina. But of course, we'd also like to congratulate lahat na nandito ngayon sa webinar na ito. And sincerely, thank you for being a part of this event. Hindi magiging successful ito without you guys. So, thank you very much. And as a token of our gratitude, we prepared a certificate of appreciation for everyone who participated. So, ayan, makikita na nyo sa inyong screens ang inyong certificate. For a while. Ayan, so certificate of participation. This certificate is awarded to, and then we're gonna input your name there. And we will be sending you these certificates sa inyong email addresses that you have provided in your registration form. So, abangan nyo na lang yan.
and to recognize the outstanding presentation of our honorable guest speakers, we award the certificate of recognition. Let's show the certificate of recognition to Miss Lyra Rojas and Miss Dubhe Ramos for imparting their valuable knowledge as key speakers of the webinar, AKAY, Honing Healthy Communication, Emotional Expression, and Empathy, held on this day of October 15, 2022, as part of the month-long holistic celebration of YWAV and Fairview, entitled Usbong, with the signatories of Jesus is Alive Head Pastor, YWAV Fairview Head and Serve HU Heads. A virtual clap everyone for our speakers for tonight. Sobrang thank you po for waking up so early in the morning. As we know guys, na Miss Jane is from Edmonton and Miss Sums is from US. But they are that eager to speak and be with us tonight. Kaya naman let's all give them heart reacts. Thank you so much po.
And click natin yung ating heart buttons to show our appreciation for our two guest speakers. So again, thank you so much po. We really appreciate po you guys na getting up so early in the morning para makapag-speak po sa amin. And we will really be taking to heart lahat po na aming natutunan tonight. Once again, we thank everyone for taking the time to join us here. Sana lumabas tayo ng Zoom meeting na ito, not just with gained knowledge, but also with a proactive decision to apply all of our learning sa ating pang-araw-araw na buhay.
And with that, we formally end this webinar and we hope that you enjoyed this night just like how we did. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Again, I am Lyra Cuarto.
And I am Cheska Serrano.
May the peace of God be with you always. Ayan, before leaving po, let's have a photo opportunity muna with our speakers. So let's open our cameras. No?
Gawin natin, Ira, yung turo natin sa kanila yung AKAY
Turo natin
sign.
sa kanya yung sign ng
So, ganito
AKAY.
lang yan,
ganito.
guys. Madali lang. Ganyan. AKAY.
AKAY.
Ganyan. So, we will be taking the screenshot in 1, 2,
May nag-screenshot
3.
na ba, guys?
Smile! Ngiti lang tayo ng matagal kasi maraming pages to, Ira.
Hindi lang po kayo ng matagal.
Okay. So, turn on your cameras para makasali po tayo. Makagaya
Thank you
tayo
so
ng
much,
ating AKAY po.
everyone. We can see all the pretty and handsome faces of everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your time.
Okay
Ayan.
na ba?
Nakagawa na ba
Ayan.
tayo ng AKAY post?
Thank you so much.
Ayan. Thank you so much, everyone. We wish you good night and we wish you well din sa inyong mga future communication scenarios. Sana ma-apply natin lahat ng ating natutunan tonight. Ayan. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
AKAY.
Thank you, Pastor Ayoli, Kuya Mike, at the team. Thank you, everyone po sa lahat po ng core leaders in Fairview. Axe Canada, thank you so much po for joining us.
God bless everyone and good night.
God
Thank
bless.
you po. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you po.
We will be sending you sa email yung certificate. So, abangan po natin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
Thank you
you.
guys.
Thank you po. Thank you,
God bless
speakers.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Thank you po. Thank you, speaker.
Bye, guys. God bless everyone.